Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest edition of the Woke Bros. Of course, I'm your co-host, Big Wos, aka Wosny Lambre, and I'm joined as always by my partner out on the west side of Los Angeles, Nando Vila. What's going on, brother?
Not much, man. It's great to see you as always.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I've actually been on my Nando shit, globe trotting. Was in Jamaica last weekend. Shouts to Roz and Jay. Beautiful wedding. Just beautiful family vibes. Was great. Lots of Jamaican food. Just so much jerk chicken. Literally every single day. Sometimes twice a day. I ate jerk chicken out there.
Fuck yeah.
Um, and tomorrow I will be on my way to Cartagena for a quick little bachelor party with my boy Anthony, who
Where are you
is
staying,
getting
dude?
married.
You staying in the old town?
I'm staying in the walled city.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm staying in there. Yeah, that seems to be like where the most of the Westerners
Yeah.
um stay. So that's where we'll be. Lots of fun times in Cartagena. I look forward to having some amazing arepas
Well, as you
and
know,
going.
back in the day, I this was in the year 2010, I think. I think it was
Mm.
2010. I produced a Mark Anthony concert in the old city of
You
Cartagena.
told me something about this. Yeah.
That was a previous life, man. That was we're older. Waz and I are older than we look. Uh,
Yes.
I know we look like we're
Yeah,
25,
spring
but
chickens, but we're not.
yeah, yeah,
Yes, young whippersnapper Nando
yeah.
with Mark Anthony in Colombia. I can only imagine the shenanigans that went down over there.
Oh, yeah, it was crazy. It was. I mean, it was really difficult. I mean, because it's like an old city. So imagine
Yeah,
like
it is.
building a stage. I mean, Mark Anthony's an A-lister, and he wanted, they all want. They want like,
Pyrotechnics and all
yeah,
kinds of
well,
crazy shit.
or just like sound systems that can sound
Yeah,
good, and
right.
and so that was a fucking pain in the ass. But it was great, man. It came off without a hitch once we did it, and that was cool.
Shouts to Mark Anthony, Puerto Rican legend, just legend, just general. But yeah, today on today's show, I just wanted to just touch base with you about this like US China thing because I'm telling you, I keep hearing more and more about China like every single day. I'm not saying this is WMDs in Iraq type of shit,
Yeah,
because clearly, like, they can't go that reckless because they would just get their asses whooped within 5 seconds. But there's like just feels like a constant drumbeat of we
yeah.
should feel like China is the enemy. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. But first, man, a while back you sent me this Alex Press uh article that she did for the Jacobin Mag. Shouts to our buddies over at Jacobin, Boschgar, and the whole crew about the Teamsters union negotiation, their collective bargaining agreement with UPS. Teamsters is one of the last powerful trade unions that exist. As you guys know, I'm a former Teamster. And the coolest thing about reading this, Nando, which is funny, is that that's the UPS that I worked out of in
Oh yeah,
Canarsie, Brooklyn on
fuck
105th
yeah.
Street. Yeah, bro. Like that was the coolest thing about reading that. And they talked about the joint in the city and just generally like the biggest strike in America was the last UPS strike
Yep.
that happened in when was that 1994
1996.
1996. And yeah, this is huge deal. UPS, as we all know, like pretty much so many other American corporations. You know what's so funny, Nando? Even in like the tech sector where it's like, oh, they're laying people off, blah, blah, blah. All of these companies are insanely profitable.
Oh
Like
yeah.
in like the amount of actual money that's being made at places like Facebook and Google is insane, but whatever. UPS is making record profits. They're the United States and global leader in shipping. And yeah, their workers want a new contract, and these guys are ready to strike for it. Like these aren't some newbies, right? These guys are dyed in the wool union guys. And I think the piece did a good job of explaining the sort of tier of UPS employee. I was that part of that bottom rung in the warehouse. I was in the sort aisle which to just give you a brief explanation, somebody unloads a big ass truck that came from God knows where. The boxes come to the sort aisle, and then we grab a package, look at the label, then we decide what belt it needs to go on depending on what part of the country it's going to. You have to memorize what state goes to what belt, so you got a little bit of extra bread. I think it was like $1.50 or something extra on your paycheck for being in the sort aisle. But yeah, there's that lower sort of worker who's mostly part-time. There's barely any full-time guys in the warehouse. And then they have the drivers who make a pretty good living. They do a decent amount of OT, but hey, man, these guys work their fucking asses off. There's just no two ways about it. And, a lot of these cars don't have air conditioning, and there's just a lot of bullshit for a country, quite frankly, as rich as UPS. And yeah, I thought the piece was quite effective in laying what the stakes are with this next negotiation.
Yeah, no, I mean it's really fascinating to witness. I mean, we touched upon it briefly last year, one of our shows, or maybe a few of our shows, the election within the Teamsters Union for new leadership. We covered it at the time. Obviously, the mainstream media doesn't cover that kind of thing.
Fuck, right?
But it is the most, like, in terms of actual politics, meaning like things that can actually have an effect on people's lives. I thought that was maybe the most important political story, maybe of the year last year. I mean, it was the Teamsters, like you said, is one of the last kind of major unions. They still have a lot of power. They still have a lot of real, actual power. And for decades, it was controlled by Jimmy Hoffa Jr., so Jimmy Hoffa's son, and who was just like a very kind of
super cozy with the bosses, extremely
cozy with the bosses, super cozy with like the Democratic Party, kind of like just like
Disgusting.
very kind of get along, go along to get along, not ruffle any feathers, and and so,
which, by the way, guys, sorry to cut you off, Nando. Like, the reason why Nando is bringing that up, for those of you listening or watching who have never been part of a union, that is the opposite of what you need to be doing.
You need to be scaring these people.
You need to be scaring the shit out of management so that they don't try to get over. Because if they can, they absolutely will. They will overwork your ass and squeeze you to the bone and just kick you out. Chew you up, spit you out. That's what they fucking do. That's what they want to do, especially in today's game, right? Like, back in the days, the overlords, man, and we say this all the time, but they really did. They had a slight sense of civic duty. Like, we're jerking these guys, but we want these guys to have a decent wage.
You know why they had that was? Because there was 40% union density, and they had to have it.
That's right.
They were forced to. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, there was just more power. Like, in the 1880s, they were like murdering workers. You know what I mean? It's just like it's a question of power. They behaved because they had to behave.
Yeah, and so the idea that the union president would be cozy, not even just that you would be cozy with the bosses and the executives at UPS, but that you would be cozy with the Democratic Party, who are basically middle management for capital. Like, that's what they are. Like, make no fucking mistake about it. There's no way to view them as anything else but capital's middle management class. And I bring up that rail worker shit because it's just the clearest example where Joe Biden and the Democratic Congress step in on behalf of the corporation, against the workers, against their constituents, period. And so the idea that you would be cozy with the Democrats as the president of the Teamsters is disgusting.
And so we talked about it last year, the election of this guy Sean O'Brien to be the new leader of the Teamsters. He was the leader of something called the Teamsters for a Democratic Union, which is kind of like a movement within the Teamsters to make it more democratic, more rank and file driven, and things like that. Like, so basically more left, more progressive, more aggressive, more confrontational. And when he won pretty handily, I was like, shit, like, now it's on, because the UPS contract is the largest private sector contract in America, period. End of story. Like that's the biggest private sector contract in America. In the piece that Alex Press wrote, I mean, it's fascinating because it shows just how much power lies within the union. UPS, 6% of America's GDP flows through UPS.
Jesus
Think
Christ.
about that.
Wow. Wow.
Of the entire economy, okay? Like the
We're
entire
talking about
pie,
billions upon billions upon billions upon billions
yeah.
upon billions. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If there's a work stoppage at UPS, that
It's a
is 6% of the American economy that is just stopped. You know, that brings capital to its knees, you know, really. I mean, they need that shit. They need the shit to flow. You know, that's the whole point. The shit needs to flow. So if there's a work stoppage, and the date to circle on your calendars is July 31st, because that's when the contract expires, they're going to start negotiations, you know, for the next few months, and they're going to try to negotiate. Given the tenor of Sean O'Brien's campaign for the Teamsters president, it seems unlikely that they're going to accept whatever offer comes from UPS. So I think a strike seems pretty likely, which in that case, it'll be like one of the most momentous things that's going to happen in America. Period in years and decades. The last strike was in 1996 and lasted I think 2 weeks or something like that. And, Bill Clinton had to fucking get involved and shit like that. Like, I mean, they have power to stop this shit. And that is the power that needs to be flexed in order to get what you need. So this is hundreds of thousands of workers. Again, the largest private sector contract in America. It's going to be pretty interesting. And obviously, we'll cover it, and I'm sure Jacobin will cover it, and Alex Press has been on the labor beat for years. Like, we'll cover it, but you will not see this on CNN.
No,
you will not see this
Don Lemon's not going to cover this.
No,
he's going to talk about trans kids in sports, which, don't get it twisted. Don't discriminate against the trans kids in sports, but goddamn, I mean, this is pretty freaking important, right? Yeah. And I think the reason why, and maybe this is my conspiratorial brain at work here, Nando, but I think the reason why you won't see this covered, or even if it is covered on CNN or even the liberal, quote unquote, MSNBC, we know it's not going to have a workers slant to it. It's going to have a corporate slant to it. And I think the reason for that is they don't want people thinking that this is the way. Yeah. This is the way you get what you want. It's organizing, it's unions. Okay, this is the only way you get what you need from the bosses. They will not do it on their own. They will not do it out of the goodness of their heart. They will not do it because it's the moral or the right thing to do. They only do it by force, by militancy. Right. And so these guys, and I love that they're doing press around it. Like, no, we're coming for these fools and we're ready to fight. And the point of the union, right, it's that not only is leadership getting you ready for this a year out, like this summer, this covered this piece, she was embedded with them from last summer. Okay, so they're getting ready for this a year out. What does that mean? The workers have time to do some belt tightening. They can put funds into the reserve, and this is what the union dues are for. If you guys have to have, hey, what's up, doggy? If you guys have to have a prolonged work stoppage, there are reserves to help you and your family not starve and be kicked out onto the streets so that we can, while they are bleeding, and UPS's partners and clients are like, yo, what the fuck? End this strike. Get my packages back moving. You guys can withstand it, and that's what's important. Like, it's hard to achieve this. Like, how do you have a strike by yourself?
No, you're powerless.
This is the soft work shit. Soft quitting shit they was talking about. That's what a single person striking is. It's soft quitting. Okay. There's no way to do this on your own, and again, like a company as profitable and as rich, as successful at UPS is, it's only that rich, successful, and profitable in so much as they have clients and business partners who depend on this good and service. Okay. And so, man, this damn near brought a twinkle to my eye. The last time I was with my dad who's also a union guy. I forget the name of the local out in New York, but he was a maintenance guy. He was a foreman for this huge the Barclays building in Midtown, and he told me, I was like, yo, did you guys ever have to strike? And I'm pretty sure it was 1996. They went on strike as well. And he was like, I was charged up about that shit. I was ready. We picketed that motherfucker. He said it lasted about 2 weeks, but he was like, we was ready to fight these fools. You know, like the way he talked about it, like got him riled up. Like these people try to play with us. And so we had to get what was ours. And so I'm really happy, obviously rooting for the Teamsters and the workers at UPS because, again, these cats work their asses off. Not just me, somebody who was a warehouse worker. The drivers work their asses off.
No, and listen, you know, a unionized UPS, like the average unionized UPS worker makes about $100,000 a year, according to the piece. It's a, you know, it's one of the last kind of secure middle-class jobs that you
don't need a college degree for.
No, you don't need a college education. It's not like a white-collar job, you know, but that's kind of how all the jobs were back in the day. I mean, they weren't literally $100,000, but they were the equivalent of adjusted for inflation.
Yeah, yes.
You know, like
you can live a decent middle-class life on that wage.
Yeah. And like the message shouldn't be like, oh my God, they make so much money. Like, what are they complaining about? No. Like it should be like, no, we all should be making, you know, like everyone should be making that much money for decent work, you know? And yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting in the sense that, again, like, you know, obviously you're not gonna hear anything about it, but just the ability that they're gonna have to really instill some damage. And it'll be interesting to watch the coverage of it when it does happen, because they'll cover it once it does happen. And it's going to be interesting to see the tenor of that coverage.
Nando, I can already see the Chiron. Are your packages late?
Yeah.
I already know the tactic. It's like, it's going to get the viewer to be like, how are these UPS drivers screwing you?
Yeah.
Viewer, and I think it's consumer.
It's worth just reminding people why this kind of thing is important, and why this is what we always talk about is like actual politics, is that politics is about who gets what in society. That's like really the fundamental question. There's a pie, there's money, you know, an economic pie, and politics is about who gets what in this society. And it's an eternal fight between capital and labor, you know, between the owners of you know, the machines and the companies and the firms and all that stuff, and the people who work for them in exchange for a wage, right? And the only way, you know, the capital has all the advantages. They have the state, they have more money, they have a million things. But the only thing that labor has in its advantage is strength in numbers and the fact that they have to do the work in order for the whole thing to fundamentally work. So if there's a pie to be divided, if there's profits and a union isn't fighting to get their share of the profits, the owners are just going to put it in their pockets. And that's how it works. They're not going to give it to them.
They're not going to be like, oh, it's Christmas. Let me give you a bonus. We've had such a good year from your blood, sweat, tears, and toil. Like, yeah, let me just hook you up because you've been so diligent as a worker. Hell no. Hell no.
No.
By the way, that's how you know I'm in New York. If you hear that siren in the background.
Yeah. Although I live in Venice, man, you never know. But yeah, so that's like, again, something to watch out for. Again, Jacobin is obviously covering it. The Nation will be covering it, and basically no one else is going to be covering it. But you know, just keep an eye out. July 31st is when the contract expires. You know, they may come to an agreement beforehand, but I think it's unlikely.
Also, you know, and the piece sort of touched on this. The Teamsters are trying to unionize Amazon, which is something we've talked about on the show before. Like the Teamsters unionizing Amazon, make no mistake about it. Amazon would fight that thing with every single thing that they had. But if that were to happen, you want to talk about a game changer. That would be just astronomical. Amazon, one of the most, you know, they're probably the US's biggest employer at this point. They're right there with Walmart and all of that shit. So that would be crazy if that could happen. But yeah, keep in mind. But yeah, Nando, there's not a news item that I wanted to touch on, but it's just a feeling that I get.
Yeah.
Again, I really wasn't politically sentient in 2002, 2003 on the run up to the Iraq War, right?
Yeah.
But people like you, because you told me you became radicalized behind the Iraq War, but people that were there at the time, when they describe it, they was just like, this shit just don't feel right. Something's fucked up about how they're trying to sell this. Like, none of it makes sense. Why would we do this? None of their evidence is lining up. This just doesn't feel right. And I'm not saying we're gonna, get lied into a war with China, but like, there's just this drumbeat in the media out of the Biden administration, the liberal Biden administration, of this just anti-China rhetoric and this sort of posturing as if we're not backing down to China, Nando. I just feel like that rhetoric is getting ratcheted up, and I'm just like, to what end? Like, what is the end here? And fans of the Levitard show will remember Dan's appearance on what was the Rock HBO NFL show where he's like an agent or some shit?
Ballers.
And Dan's in that scene with The Rock, and The Rock's name on the show was Spence, and Dan goes, "What's the end game here, Spence?" Like, they used to always play that clip over and over and over again. Like, what is the end game here, Dan? Like, they can't possibly think they can go to actual war with actual China. Like, that can't possibly be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, the run up to the Iraq War is crazy. I mean, I would love to watch. Like, I would watch a kind of docu-series that just did a TikTok of how it all went down, because that time period in American politics, sort of basically the day after 9/11 through the fall of 2003, is just the most insane period that, like, you think the Trump shit was insane. That was more funny, and obviously, like, there was bad stuff, but like, nothing to do. Like, America went fucking crazy during that time. I mean, it was like fully fascist. It was just like, like, they didn't give a fuck, everyone, the media, like liberal media, conservative media, Democrats, Republicans, everyone was fucking on, like, just in lockstep on board with
like, if you didn't support the war, people were calling you a traitor.
Oh yeah,
like, you were committing treason if you weren't, like, waving pom-poms for all-out war.
Yep. No. So it was crazy. I mean, and you're right that, like, a lot of the China stuff is reminiscent of that. I mean, it's like less kind of hot as that was, because that was like just the passions were super high. But here's the thing you got to understand about China. In China, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, took power in China after a very long struggle and very long civil war in 1949. Okay. In 1950, the first year of them being in power, China was one of the poorest countries on earth. Okay. This was 73 years ago. Okay. In one guy's lifetime, they're about to pass the United States in terms of GDP. Okay. That's just like, it's worth remembering. China was one of the poorest countries on earth not too long ago. And in a handful of years, it's going to be number one in terms of richest countries on earth. Okay. It's going to pass the United States. That fact, that economic miracle, because it is just an economic miracle, drives the U.S. power elite fucking crazy,
Which is hilarious, is because we made them rich.
Partly. Yeah. They were just smarter.
That's it. They were just like all of the, like, usually when it's so funny, because like usually when we go in and extract value from countries, like, it's just this one-way street, where China was like, no, like, and these fucking idiots, they're just so happy to get this cheap ass labor and these profit increases. They don't give a fuck at what cost at the time. They're just like, yeah, whatever, man. We'll teach you how to make a factory on your own. Yeah, we'll teach you how to make movies. We'll teach you who gives a shit. We just want to sell shit to your billion people. Like, they, like, all along the way, like, China's just like, all right, you can do this, but we need X, Y, and Z. Like, they got a lot of resources from us We helped build these people up 100%.
And know-how, like they got like a lot of
Everything.
no, and so the China was just really smart, and because they have a strong central government, an active central government that guides industrial policy and has an active role in the economy, right? Like the kind of standard thinking, both on on the liberal side and on the conservative side in the West, for the last 40 years has been like economic growth basically happens when the government just doesn't interfere as much in the economy, lets businesses kind of do their thing and whatever. The problem is that businesses have an incredibly short-term view of things. Like they need to just make next quarter's numbers.
Yeah.
And so anything that gives you a short-term sugar high is good. They're not thinking 20 years ahead. They can't, like they can dedicate like a small percentage of their budget to long-term planning, but for the most part, they need to make next month's quarters or the next quarter's profit statement. Whereas a government, like in theory, should have a much more long-term view, kind of managed in the best interest of the health of the overall society, not just like short-term profit. And so China guided its industrial policy with that view in mind. They played the long game. They were just like, we're going to be rich if we just play this right, and they basically allowed the Americans in, and the Americans were just, eating candy. It was like a sugar high. Like they're like, yes, 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 yes. But the whole time it was just making them sick, and now the patient is just diarrheaing all over the place. And China is just like fucking laughing all the way to the bank. And that's basically what's going on, is that there's definitely a sense of threat. I've always said that psychologically for Americans, the day that China's GDP passes America's, that's going to be a psychological
for those people. Yeah,
blow.
For sure. It's like we're not the biggest swinging dick on the geo block anymore, and that gets on our nerves.
And that's fundamentally like kind of what's going on with a lot of this, is like there's this feeling that China needs to be confronted because it's going to be the richest country in the world. It's going, it has a more coherent state. You know what I mean? Like the United States is a shit show government. Like they can't do anything. Like nothing can be done. Like China, just like if they want to do something, they just do it.
Only thing they can do is build up funds for military shit. Yeah. Whatever that shit is. That's it. Again, that's like, all our government can be marshaled to do. Funds for military stuff.
Yeah, and it's like I don't like want to, like obviously China, doesn't have as many civil liberties as the United States, which is a great freedom that was won in the United States. Like the and like all that's 100% true. But in terms of the role of the state in the economy, like, tip of the hat to the Chinese. Like, my God, like, you know what I mean? Like, these people were like incredibly poor when we were born. Like when we and I were born, these people were like, unbelievably poor, and now China is rich. Like you just go around China, like there's still like poor areas, plenty of poor areas in the United States too. But China is a rich country. Like it is a rich country with a lot going for it, and it's only going to become richer and more powerful because, again, they figured out how to play the modern economy. They don't get involved in wars. They don't get involved. Like they just don't. Like there's this. Americans are convinced that like these Chinese are like violent, kind of sadistic people, and it's like, man, when's the last time they fought a war?
Or even a proxy war.
Yeah,
right. Nothing. Like the shit that Saudi's doing in Yemen. You know what I mean?
Like they don't get involved in that.
Where is this? Or what we're doing in Ukraine, where we're just clearly involved in that war. Like we're waving Ukrainian flags in the halls of our Congress. Like, where is that happening in China?
They don't get involved. Yeah, it's not in their interest. They don't get involved. Like they don't get involved.
So this is what I wanted to ask you, Nando, because like this shit has been driving me crazy. Because I'm like, how could anybody buy that we could actually go to war or start a new Cold War, right? And just think about like if fuck the war on terror, because that shit was just fake to begin with. Let's just talk about like.
Well, it was fake and it wasn't, in the sense that we just kept on bombing the Middle East nonstop.
Right, so, but we didn't have an actual enemy. Like terror is a concept, it's an idea. It's not a place. It's not a government, right? So let's just talk about the Soviet Union, right? Where there's all this fucking red baiting, all these people always constantly getting, accused of being communist spies, and we got the McCarthy shit and all of that, and like let's just say we did a McCarthy era thing, but for China. We're gonna haul in the CEO of Apple? Like, what the fuck? Like,
Well, yeah, I mean,
these
that's the
people
thing
have
is,
direct relationships with the Chinese government, with the CCP, like directly. This is not indirect. This isn't hearsay. It's on the record. They have been partners with the Chinese government, American business. Like what? What are we talking about here?
it's 100% true that the economies are just way too intertwined for there to be I think there to be a meaningful confrontation. I mean, the thing is, like, the United States is like is they're so short-sighted, and they're very kind of, they're just kind of like the bumbling empire in a way. Like they don't have a sound strategic vision. Like, I mean, there's a world, they're like freaking out about Taiwan, for example, and they're convinced
Why?
that China's just going to, and like the cold realpolitik take on Taiwan should be like, you know, if they want it, they kind of got it. You know what I mean? Like, what are we going to do about it, really? Like,
And who are we
um,
that we get to say what happens in Taiwan? And like, I'm sorry for the look, man. I feel bad for the folks that live in Taiwan. From what I hear, it's a wonderful place, and those folks enjoy way more civil liberties than people do on the mainland of China. Salute. Like, I would love to see that continue for them. But at the same time, like, I don't see how this is any different than like, Mississippi. Like, like, how could China tell us like, oh, it's fucked up? You can't go into Mississippi and impose It's like, I don't understand that. Like, I like the Taiwanese thing just makes no sense to me. Like,
no,
long
and the
term,
thing is,
like,
like,
how long can we like pretend that we deserve to have influence in Taiwan?
no, and it's more like, I mean, it's a little bit like Putin's war in Ukraine, in that, like, I mean, it's one thing to say, like, I mean, obviously it's unjustified in a crime, and a China invasion of Taiwan would be like insane and criminal and wrong and whatever. Like, I condemn it with all my possible condemnation. That being said, like, it's like the United States has to be like, is supposed to be some sort of arbiter of moral, clarity on these questions, but also like the kind of enforcer of some sort of international law. Like, the answer is no. Like, that has failed time and time again. Not just, and it's not like, I hesitate to use the word failed, but you know what I mean. Like, on its own terms, like, it's failed. Like that.
Yeah.
That always just ends up being like a death and destruction, and no good comes of it. Like,
What
just
what
no
does
good comes of it.
what does Danny call it? Liberal internationalism?
Yeah, liberal interventionism.
Yeah, it's just like, bro, we suck at it. And this idea that, oh, we're gonna go in there and we're gonna do all of this good, and our tanks are gonna bring peace, and it's just
Yeah,
like
the drone strike.
American GIs are gonna just, they're gonna bring the countries together. It's like, what the fuck are y'all talking about? How
Yeah,
can that work? How can the army, how can be the army or the Marines or special forces be a force for peace in some country abroad? That doesn't make sense. Their job is to kill.
yeah,
Like, that's the whole reason for being. It's the killing machine. Like,
yeah.
I just don't understand it. It's not a Swiss Army knife, that can do multiple things. Like, no, it's a hammer
It's
that
not a
finds
precision
nails.
instrument. Yeah, it's
It's
not like
just
a
not.
laser guided
No.
surgery tool. It's like trying to, yeah, do a heart transplant with like a hammer and a saw. You know?
It's like, that's not how this works. It's not the application. But yeah, it's just something that I just been noticing in media, and even it's creeping into some of my normie conversations where, there's all this stuff about TikTok getting shut down, and I don't even know how
Oh,
true that is.
yeah, and
But
it's happening. It's happening because China is closing off to a lot of American businesses, right? Like, I mean, Hollywood is the classic example. Like, I mean, they're doing what's called in economics like import substitution industrialization, meaning like they're building up their economy by basically blocking other people from investing with, like, the United States over many decades. What they do is they force countries to allow their capital to flow into those countries to own the productive enterprises within those industries. I mean, the classic case is
that's
Central
just the
America.
colonialism writ large. That's
Yeah,
the project.
it's basically just a sleeker way of doing colonialism, right? Like, it's like a more, crafty way of doing it. But the classic example is like Central America and the Caribbean, where like the United States would just like they wouldn't like occupy a country. I mean, sometimes they did, but like that wasn't like their main target. It was just like, oh, we'll just own like all the good shit that you have,
Yeah,
and take all the
American
money out of
private
it.
interests will be the ones that get to extract the value from your country
Yeah, and
and
China's
share
like, no,
in
you
none of the
can't do that.
profits with your
Yeah,
people. None of it. And China's like, fuck off.
yeah,
That's
we
not a
can't do
thing.
that. Yeah,
Like,
well,
it's just hilarious to me. It's just like, just imagine there's like gold somewhere in California, let's just say. And the biggest gold mining and manufacturing company was Chinese. No, like a Chinese company gets to just come and dig gold out the ground
and take it
and
out
keep
back
and
to
take it out and keep nobody would think that made sense. Nobody would think that a Chinese private actor should come in and extract the resources from an American state. Like nobody would think that made any sense. And yet we do that everywhere across the globe.
And by the way, the United States did that in the 19th century with the UK, when the UK was the United States, right? Like before the United States was the United States, the British Empire was the United States, and there was a huge amount of diplomatic tension, and even some like the War of 1812 was partly fought over this kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like the United States was like, no, we need to we need our own industrial revolution. Like you already have yours. Like we're blocking and we're creating high tariffs. You know what I mean? We build up high tariffs to block cheaper British goods from coming into the United States, and the profits going back in the other direction, and we're gonna industrialize ourselves. Like it's just like basic 101 economic theory. Although just ever since like the neoliberal era, there was this idea that just free market around the world is good for the poor people, and it's just not. Like it's
No,
just
it's not.
not. It's good for the people who are already rich,
We're
but
poor
it's not
now
good for
for
the.
it.
It's not good for the poors. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to get into that, man. Make sure you guys subscribe to patreon.com/count the dings. We will see you guys next week. Check out all our other Count the Dings offerings. Nando, thank you for your work today. We'll see you guys next week. Peace out.